So, how long have you been an occupational therapist?
40 years.
What made you become an OT?
Um, it's a good question. When I was younger, I was sick and in the hospital a lot, and there was a person that would come around and sort of get me to do certain things while I was there to make the hospital stay a little bit more pleasant. And I remember that person being helpful, and somehow that memory, I think, kind of lived in me. And as I got into high school, there was a friend of the family that had a son who was married to an OT. And we were there for dinner one night, or maybe it was a special occasion, I can't remember. But anyway, she was there, and I was talking about how I wanted to go to college and how I think I want to help people, and wasn't quite sure what career to choose. And she said, well, I'm an OT and this is what I do, and she described what she did. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty cool. I like that, and it kind of struck that memory, I think, of when I was a kid, and this person used to come around and make my hospital stay better. And so she said, if you'd like to come and see me at work, you're welcome to see me. Her. And then I went to her job, and I saw her at work, and I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. Yeah. I was probably about maybe 16 at the time.
So you found out pretty young when you wanted to.
Yeah, I knew right away that's what I wanted to do.
Okay. Where did you receive your OT degree?
I got it at Quinnipiac College, which is now Quinnipiac University in Connecticut.
Okay.
And what happened was it was a college, and it had an allied health school, and it had an OT accredited program, a PT accredited program, and they had speech therapy too, if I can remember. They had nursing for sure. And it was a small school, and I thought I wanted to go to a small school. And somewhere along the way, Quinnipiac College bought the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, and they had a school of business. And when they purchased that, or they merged somehow, Quinnipiac College changed to Quinnipiac University. So now, if you looked it up, it would be Quinnipiac University in Connecticut.
Was it still like a master's thing, or was it a bachelor?
Mine was a bachelor's.
Okay.
And now it's mandatory a master's. So I believe they still offer occupational therapy, and I believe it is a master's program now. But when I went to the school, I was going, I only had to go for the 4 years basically, and got my bachelor's degree.
Okay. What do you like most about your job?
It's different every day, which I like. I like that I can be flexible in my hours.
Create your own schedule.
Create my own schedule a little bit better than maybe some other jobs. I like to problem solve, and every day I engage in problem solving and trying to come up with maybe an easier or better way for someone to do something, or maybe get a little bit more sort of awareness.
Like the step stool thing we were
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. And so I think I like it best because it helps people become more independent, and it also is a career that's over time had that challenge every day of being a little bit different. And when you're seeing success, that in itself is a reward, and that makes you feel happy about your job, and I really like to go back, the next day. So I don't have trouble with that part.
What do you like the least about your job?
The documentation. Did you know I was going to answer that way?
Yeah.
I can tell you that part can bring you down. It can make you very, it can change something that's so, social and interactive to something that then you now have to try and use all the language that you can to describe what happened in an interaction. It's always really hard to portray in words what's happened in the experience of having that relationship with a client. So I feel like that documentation is always difficult because you're trying to use words to describe something that's very much nonverbal.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you have enough time, like, for documentation?
No.
So you want extra time?
I don't have enough time at work.
So you have to do it home.
And yeah, the most of the time, the reason I don't have the ability at work is because of my own issues with my attention and getting those words sometimes for me to go on paper and reflect what happened is hard. So I have to think, and I have to be on point, and I have to be in that place of almost total commitment, because if I'm distracted or if something else pulls me away and I lose my train of thought, then it doesn't really, sometimes it doesn't always, it's not like you can finish the note. You have to close that note. You have to go to now another situation. You might be seeing another client. You have to go back in. You have to edit that document. And when you reread it, you realize, oh, that didn't make sense. Next thing you know, you're changing some words around. Or I forgot what happened, and you add something in, so you edit again. And you do a lot of that stuff before you finally put your name on it and you say, I'm done. And I think I wanted to reflect truth of what happened. And again, it's not always so easy to come up with the words to describe what happened. And talk about your skills in a way that reflects your interventions. Sometimes it's just about, I don't know, it's just really hard to come up with describing everything you've done to try and make something happen, because you've used many different strategies. Or for someone like me, I've been around for a long time. Sometimes just by nature I start doing something and I don't even know how to describe that.
Do you often forget what happened in a session if you go to the next class?
I've learned how to remember.
Okay.
And that's because I've done this for so long. I think that I've sort of taught myself how to keep
track of things.
Keep track. Now, some therapists will take and write down what they did in the session right after they finish the session, and that way they have some key words to help them with recall and recounting basically what happened. But for me, I usually remember. I just don't want to write anything down. I just don't feel I want to go that route to add more to what already is tricky and a little hard. But I can't write notes here at work as well as I can at home. So I get up at 5:30 in the morning every day, and for 3 hours I document before even going into the workplace.
So before you come here, you're doing notes?
3 hours usually per day, and I get about 4 hours a week paid documentation time.
Okay. How long have you been working at DTA?
I started at DTA in 95, so 23 years.
Have you always worked with children?
Yes.
Okay.
I also worked with adults a bit too, but I still had a caseload of kids.
So you work more with kids than adults?
Yeah, for a brief period of time I did some consulting for a nursing home, and I was doing some evaluations just to get some extra money on the side. And I did see those adults, obviously, for a period of time, but most of my full-time job was working with kids.
Do you prefer them?
I couldn't work with the adults. It wasn't my thing. I mean, I've always been very playful and loved games and loved children, and I interact better with children than adults. And it was never in my mind that I would ever seek out a career of OT with adults. It was always in the mindset that if I did OT, it would be with kids. So.
What advice would you give someone who is interested in OT?
I don't know what my advice would be. I guess it would be to, learn from what you see in others and how they manage and get by on things and what's important to them. Because OT is really about helping a person be as independent as possible at any age, basically across all environments. So if you take that true definition, it's about, if you are going into OT, you have to watch how people interact and with things and what makes them happy, and kind of notice the little things that might help for a person to be successful. Kind of like what happened with Jonathan, you know, where that strap was on the wrong side.
Oh, yeah, he couldn't reach.
And if it was just a simple fix, I saw that his father didn't. So I find that we see things sometimes in a way that you have to kind of be a person that notices things.
Observe.
And notices details and thinks, how could I help that person maybe do it easier? And understand tasks, and that there's a process or a step-by-step sort of sequence. And if you're not really keen on noticing those things and you just see end product, then I wouldn't say OT is a good field for you. You have to be the person that's kind of liking the part that takes you on the journey, right? The part that starts you and finishes you in the midst of a task. And when the kids or anybody really who you know, has some kind of injury or illness, and they are able to finally go back to something that they've been wanting to do, or that they could do and now can't do. It's always great to see their happiness with their success.
See them progress.
Right. So I think if you're gonna, advice would be, notice the little things, think about the process. If you don't like that part, then don't go into the field. And what else might I suggest? I'm going to say, you know, just also too, to realize that you are an important person to making that outcome be successful. And you have to be ready to be in that role.
You help that big picture, basically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. You have to be in that place of wanting to be part of something. Because you can't watch. That's not going to work for you. You know, watching doesn't, I mean, you have to watch, but you have to then go further than that, right? You can't just watch as an onlooker and then walk away. You have to be ready to be involved. Like in the eval yesterday, I couldn't just evaluate the child. I had to start treating him. I couldn't just watch. I couldn't just say I saw this. I had to sort of act on what I was seeing right away, and it was terrible for me to try and hold that back, because I know I could make it different, and you don't want to be a bystander. You want to be involved. So if you don't have drive, commitment, stamina, readiness for things to fail repeatedly, but this endurance to see it through, then it's just not a field for you. So
you gotta have that patience. What would you say your biggest challenge was as an OT?
I'm guessing probably, like any person, the biggest challenge in my life with being an OT has literally just being able to figure out how to live my life and do my job, and not let some of the things that happen at work influence my life, my personal life. And I think that goes for any occupation, literally, right?
Don't bring
As
the
they
work
say,
home.
try not to bring the work home. Try to do what you can to be at work and be present and be available, and so on and so forth, to see things through. Yet know that when you're at home, you're meant to try and also define that place and how you need to be, and I've always had a little bit of trouble with that
Mhm.
because of the documentation. Look, if it takes me 2 and 3 hours a day to do the documentation, then you know that it's going to affect you being at
Mhm.
home. But I've niched it into my life at a time where I feel I can do it most efficiently. And you have to figure those things out for yourself because over the long haul, right, you have to have a pattern that works for you and then see it that way through over time. The other part I would say is that when you're working with kids, when you walk in the door, sometimes you just don't feel like facing some of the stuff they can sometimes throw at you in terms of their conduct, their behavior, their willingness to comply or do things, and learning how to put a mask on so that you can go to work and you can put your game face on has been an ongoing, I think, event. I wouldn't say it's my biggest challenge, but for sure it's something one needs to learn how to do because if you have a face or if you bring in sort of your emotions to your job, they're almost contagious in that other people sense those things and children sense it very quickly. So if you're not able to do that sort of a thing and make your transition into work and sort of hold your own in your job and do as you need to do to meet the demands here, then it'll reflect to others and it will make you less effective. So we have to figure out how to put our game face on. But I think that's another thing. It doesn't have to be just in regards to OT. It could be anything.
Okay, last one is, what is your most memorable moment?
I don't really know if I have one or many memorable moments. I want to say I have many memorable moments, not just one. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But back in, I want to say it was 2000 and maybe 5 or 6. I'll have to go look. But I received an award for basically being a good therapist. It was awarded to me through the ARC program, which is your ARC is what do you want to say? It's like I think it's Association for Retarded Children, but I think they've maybe changed that or they don't use that word anymore because retarded is kind of like a password. But anyway, ARC gave out these awards and a family that I was working with submitted or nominated me and it turned out that I was selected and I got an award. And there was this big event that took place and they called my name and I went up to receive it and I didn't know beforehand that I had won. So anyway, not that I'm into prizes or anything, but for that family to have written me up in a way to nominate me for this was pretty special. And I've done a lot of things that I have felt, a closeness to families in particular that has made me feel like they really genuinely cared about me and I cared about them. And I'm not sure I can name one thing, but that was a pretty special moment. A lot of times we don't get recognized for much of anything. We might be a part of someone's life in this little window of years. Over the scheme of life, it's not like people 20 years later, like I've been in this for 40 years, so it's not like 20 years later somebody writes me and says, oh Evelyn, thank you so much for helping my son, you know what I mean? So those kinds of benefits or rewards are sort of few and far between. You have to decide on those rewards that come more just in the moment and make sure that you embrace them. And whenever I see a kid accomplish something that was really hard for them or do better in something, obviously I'm happy. I think going to work pretty much for 40 years and having my day be good and me feel good about my career is probably the most important part of my life, you know, as far as being an OT. That in itself has been a reward and quite important. And I'm so grateful. And I guess one other thing, I will mention one other thing. The fact that my daughter Jenny became an OT is probably one of the most special things that could have happened to me as a mom and as a therapist.
She followed your footsteps.
She sure did, and that says a lot, doesn't it? So, anyway.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.